Welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene and today's online service. In this time of COVID-19, when we must stay apart in order to show our care and concern and love for one another. In this time of civil unrest, when we must allow ourselves to get vulnerable in order to live our ideals. In this time of political grasping and greed and dissolution, when we must continue to give voice to compassion and continue to engage even through our exhaustion, fear, and pain. In this time, we welcome you. Let us take refuge in one another and in this loving community. Let us lift up one another when we are weary. Let us give voice to one another's strength, one another's pain, in a circle of empathy that is wide enough to encompass each of us. Let us practice a radical hospitality of the heart, allowing ourselves to be cracked open yet again in our search for truth and meaning. Let us be one people, together in spirit for this hour. Welcome.
As we ready to light our chalice, so please gather yours or make one from your hands. I love this. Each time we gather, we light a chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And these are the words of Lisa Doge. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing, a cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst, a cup of wine for celebration and dedication, the flame of truth, the fire of purification, oil for anointing, healing, out of chaos and fear, thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty, rage, and sorrow, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home.
I'll invite us now to settle a little more deeply into this space and this time. I was at a recent meditation session, Zoom, of course, and the instructor there invited us to think about what we had brought into the room with us, what was maybe trailing behind us. And that question, what is trailing behind you right now? What are you bringing into this space? It made me think of the comet that for the last couple of weeks has been visible in the northwestern sky, Neowise. You know, all of that trailing tail that slides behind that comet is debris and space dust and hardened aspects of that comet that have broken off into pieces, and yet it is so incredibly beautiful. So whatever you have trailing behind you right now, whatever is up for you in your life, I invite you to settle into your seat and to loosen your grasp on those things for just a little bit. We'll enter now into our meditation.
Our call to worship this morning comes from the words of Ma Teresa Castillo Gallardo. Ultimate grace, the heart of every matter, in every perfection and imperfection, in all senses and tenses, in moments of every right and wrong, presenting choices to inquiring hearts. You are in the purpose and the journey of mishaps. You are in moments of understanding and misunderstanding. We have but to seek and invoke you and enable the work of your spirit. As prayer is but an articulated common dream, we invoke our ultimate concern for the work of faith. We long to be hand in hand, creating a world where everyone belongs. Free us from hindrances. Make invisible things visible, the voiceless heard. Lay what is hidden before us. Make the chained unbound, the doubting believe. What is confusing, let clarify, as hardened hearts grow soft to the touch. May we come in fullness, with gratefulness, in faithfulness to one another. May we speak in kind conversing, disclosing our truths with care, expressing our practical wisdom to learn of its practical limits. For the world was not meant to be possessed by a singular truth, but to be built together upon revelations. O universe with stars in your hair, you have shown that great things emerge from humble beginnings, no matter how flawed and lacking. That one story in a stable, in prison, in the cave, in destitution, in abject poverty, if lived in all sincerity, can liberate from darkness the many. May our eyes seek to appreciate, our breaths to dedicate power, our hands to warm each other. When living fearlessly, we are invincible. When free will is deliberate, we are pivotal. When dreaming together, we are infinite. Remind us of the very questions that we have turned away from, that we thought could not be answered or are impossible to realize. Dear universal intelligence, your embrace contains everything but confines nothing. In the ever insistence of existence, may this one moment count. Amen.
I thought that for this morning's story that we could do a little exercise together. So this is going to be a relatively interactive story this morning. So in her book, The Book of Qualities, the author J. Ruth Gendler imagines personalities into different qualities. Qualities like vanity or courage or grace, compassion. It's a relatively slim volume. I'm going to show it to you here, The Book of Qualities. But often, Gendler's take on our human qualities, they're surprising and insightful and playful. So we're going to get a chance ourselves to try imagining qualities into human form. And I'm going to read for you one example first, where she takes the quality of intuition and imagines intuition's personality, her lifestyle. She imagines how intuition might live in the world. Here we go. I invited intuition to stay in my house when my roommates went north. I warned her that I am territorial and I keep the herb jars in alphabetical order. Intuition confessed that she has a spotty employment record. She was fired from her last job for daydreaming. When intuition moved in, she washed all the windows, cleaned out the fireplace, planted fruit trees, and lit purple candles. She doesn't cook much, but she does eat beautiful foods, artichokes and avocados, persimmons and pomegranates, wild rice with wild mushrooms, chrysanthemum tea. She doesn't have many possessions. Each thing is special. I wish you could see the way she arranged her treasures on the fireplace mantle. She has a splendid collection of cups, bowls, and baskets. Well, the herbs are still in alphabetical order, and I can't complain about how the house looks. Since intuition moved in, my life has been turned inside out. And here's Gendler's image of intuition. So in just a moment, we'll hear how Gendler's vision for how power might be if power was personified. But I kind of wondered what you might have to say about it. I'd like you to consider some questions, and we'll be posting them on a slide for you. And I want you to be answering them in the chat box as thoughts come to you. There are no right answers, no wrong answers. This is just a way for us to get creative and imaginative together for a bit. So the questions that I have for you are, what kinds of personality traits does power possess? What might power do as a profession? How might power act when faced with a dilemma? So I'll ask that the slide be posted, and we'll just take a little time while Suzanne plays us some music to think through those questions and answer them in the chat box. So here's Ruth Gendler's interpretation of power as a person. She writes, "Power made me a coat. For a long time, I kept it in the back of my closet. I didn't like to wear it much, but I always took good care of it. When I first started wearing it again, it smelled like mothballs. As I wore it more, it started fitting better and stopped smelling like mothballs."
Well, I was afraid if I wore the coat too much, someone would want to take it, or else I would accidentally leave it in the dressing room. But it has my name on the label now. Doesn't really fit anyone else. When people ask me where I found such a becoming garment, I tell them about the tailor, Power, who knows how to make coats that you grow into. First, you must find the courage to approach him and ask him to make your coat. Then, you must find the patience inside yourself to wear the coat until it fits.
So, as we heard in this reading, Ruth Gendler imagines power is a tailor. Power creates for each of us a coat, something that we have to grow into and fully inhabit. So today, I want to talk about those dynamics, that dynamic of growth and the interrelationship between our sense of authority in our own lives and our painful experiences that might serve to either help us move into our power or might keep us stuck, wearing a coat too big to fit us, feeling awkward and unsuited to the task. I was introduced to the author and philosopher Eckhart Tolle through Oprah's Super Soul conversations. So Oprah has not only a TV show and a production company and owns a portion of Hawaiian Islands, and she oversees magazine, but she also hosts a podcast. Somehow she finds time to do that too. And in her podcast, Super Soul Conversations, she talks to a wide variety of guests. But the focus is really on tending our own souls. Several years ago, she did a 10-part series that featured Eckhart Tolle. And together they read through his book, A New Earth, chapter by chapter, and then discussed the ideas together and with participants that he had written about. And one of the ideas that he describes in his book, A New Earth, is this idea that I just keep coming back to. It's his description of what he calls the pain body. Now, according to Tolle, the pain body is almost like an entity that can take over us when and can take over our functioning when it's activated. We use the language of being triggered right now in our culture. So when we get triggered, the pain body comes in. When something reminds us of past painful experiences, that pain body will lash out or freeze or say things we don't mean. When something other than our best selves takes over and we're no longer in our right minds, that's the pain body. It's a collection of reactions and responses that grasp onto our pain and increase it, because according to Tolle, that's how it stays alive. So pain perpetuating pain. We might talk about this pain body reactivity as operating from our amygdala or the lizard brain. These are all different ways to describe the same phenomenon. In fact, the author Bessel van der Kolk, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, talks about this same idea that we hold on to trauma responses in our bodies. He actually takes the idea a step further. He says that we hold on to generations of trauma in our bodies. That these experiences, in fact, have a cellular level epigenetic, that's the term, epigenetic change. Slight mutations to our genetic code that are direct responses to individual traumatic or painful events. Now, I actually find this rather hopeful. It seems like maybe this is an insurmountable thing, but in fact, our body is responsive, it's intelligent, it's capable, and wholly other than rational. To think of the body in this way, as a responsive, intelligent, other than rational thing, it's relatively new to modern thought. Educated white men for the past several thousand years have spent a lot of time arguing for and making the case for a separation of our logical minds from our sensual beings. Modern sciences have seen the body as a kind of a mechanical contraption, much like the clockworks of a grandfather clock. But anyone who has lived a life, who has experienced pain and loss that they cannot make sense of, knows that we are much different from grandfather clocks. We are much more nuanced than that. You might say that there are many more people living within our single body than meets the eye. Inner children and inner rebellious teenagers, intuitions and graces, powers and angers. The processes are far less straightforward than even the most intricate of clockworks. So one of the wonderful things about this intricacy of our interior lives, is that those neural pathways that get laid down and overlaid and relayed in response to our experiences, they have a lot of resiliency, and they're far more malleable than we maybe have been led to believe. Unlike the wheels and cogs at the interior of a clock, we have the ability to transform ourselves. In fact, in the world of scientific method, it's been discovered that the very act of observing a subject will have an influence on the behavior of that subject, and thus will influence the outcome of the experiment. It's called the observer effect. Wikipedia, that source of knowledge, and also maybe we want to double check it, but it says this is the quote from Wikipedia: in science, the term observer effect means that the act of observing will influence the phenomenon being observed. For example, for us to see an electron, a photon must first interact with it, and this interaction will change the path, will change the outcome for that electron. This truth, this observer effect, it really speaks to the heart of that interconnected web that we are all a part of, that you use, affirm, and promote as part of our foundation. So, given all of that, is it any wonder that Tolle encourages us to use that power of observation on our own behaviors, impulses, and triggers? What better way to both understand and develop compassion for and patience with ourselves and our lives than to spend some time observing ourselves? Through the very act of observing, it is inevitable. It's a scientifically proven inevitability that we will influence our behaviors, impulses, and reactions. Tolle writes, most ancient religions and spiritual traditions share this common insight, that our normal state of mind is marred by some sort of fundamental defect. However, out of this insight into the nature of the human condition, what we might call the bad news, arises a second insight, the good news of the possibility of a radical transformation of human consciousness. In Hindu teachings, and sometimes in Buddhism also, this transformation is called enlightenment. In the teachings of Jesus, it's called salvation. In Buddhism, the end of suffering. Liberation, awakening, these are all terms used to describe that kind of transformation. So essentially what the Buddha and Jesus and Lao Tzu and other great teachers are trying to tell us, according to Tolle, is that we have the ability to enact transformation in our own lives. It goes both ways. Those epigenetic changes are possible in both directions. If pain and trauma can cause cellular level epigenetic changes, keeping us tied to and directed by our pain body, as van der Kolk describes in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, then so too can thoughtful, compassionate observation and exploration of the self cause cellular level changes with the potential to impact generations to come. So you've heard me talk before about the fact that I practice meditation, and it really is just a practice. This is because I, like most of us, am a person with my own trigger points, impulses, and reactions. You might say that when left unchecked, my pain body could at times, and has at times, taken over and run the show. For me, the ongoing pain this has created in my life became greater than my discomfort with sitting still. Having had the experience of applying this kind of scientific and purposeful approach to my own inner life, the observation of my own interior, it made me think about other ways that we might apply this knowledge to work with our collective pain in ways that might ultimately empower all of us. So I want to take this kind of basic framework, this idea that purposeful self-observation can have powerful positive effects, and I want to take it in a slightly different direction, another step. So in preparation for my first seminary class, a class called the Eco Intensive, I was given a list of books and articles to familiarize myself with. Eco is a hyper-shortened term that stands for educating to create just and sustainable communities that counter oppressions. They fit all that into eco. It was in this framework that I was introduced to the work of Resmaa Menakem. In her book, My Grandmother's Hands, Menakem explores concepts of the impact of pain and our potential responses to it in a slightly different term. And those terms reinforce what I'm talking about here today. She talks about the fact that all people experience pain in their lives. And then she breaks it down a little bit further. She writes, in my therapy office, I tell clients that there are two kinds of pain: clean pain and dirty pain. Clean pain is pain that mends and can build your capacity for growth. It's the pain you experience when you know exactly what you need to say or do, when you really, really don't want to say or do it, and when you do it anyway. It's also the pain you experience when you have no idea what to do, when you're scared or worried about what might happen, and when you step forward into the unknown anyway, with honesty and vulnerability. Experiencing clean pain enables us to engage our integrity and tap into our body's inherent resilience and coherence. Paradoxically, only by walking into our pain or discomfort, fully experiencing it, moving through it, and metabolizing it, can we grow. It's just how the human body works. She goes on to say, dirty pain is the pain that arises out of avoidance, blame, or denial. When people respond from their most wounded parts, becoming cruel or violent, or physically or emotionally running away, they experience dirty pain. In doing so, they create more dirty pain for themselves and for others. That's the end of the quote. So I'd invite us now to think a little bit about our own experiences with clean and dirty pain, how these experiences have impacted us when we think back to them. I think because we're human, most of us have had experiences of both kinds of pain in our lives. One example of dirty pain that feels instructive to me might be seen in a person's struggle with alcoholism or addiction, either in themselves or in a family member or friend. The classic cycle is that a person who struggles with alcoholism has experienced trauma, often unspecified, and so drinks to numb that pain, creating additional shame and pain, and thus heaping more pain, shame, guilt, and unhappiness on top of the initial painful experience. This cycle of dirty pain can be pretty easily seen in that example. And I see that someone just posted that Resmaa Menakem is actually pronouns he, him, so I apologize. We'll shift those. Apologies. So all of that framework now for the countering oppression aspect of this. Menakem explains dirty pain is a key factor in the perpetuation of white supremacy and many people's inability or refusal to experience clean pain around the myth of race. He writes, clean pain hurts like hell, but it enables our bodies to grow through our difficulties, to develop nuanced skill and mend our trauma. In this process, the body metabolizes clean pain. The body can then settle. More room for growth is created in its nervous system, and the self becomes freer and more capable because it now has access to energy that was previously protected, bound, and constricted. When this happens, people's lives often improve in other ways as well. Now, all of this can happen both at a personal level and at a collective level. In fact, if American bodies are to move beyond the pain and limitation of white body supremacy, it needs to happen in both realms. Accepting clean pain will allow white Americans to confront their long-time collective disassociation and silence. It will enable African Americans to confront their internalization of defectiveness and self-hate. And it will help public safety professionals in many localities to confront the recent metamorphosis of their role from serving the community to serving as soldiers and prison guards. End quote. Now, with the resurgence of a national presence of the Black Lives Matter movement in the middle of this moment of pandemic, with the national attention on the murders of Black Americans, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, many, many more, that have come to light or have had a prolonged light shown on them. The stark realities of which populations are being hardest hit. There have been conversations that I imagine each of us have engaged in our homes, with our friends, on our Facebook pages, at a national level. We continue to see force, a very particular kind of power that people imagined power possessing when we did that little exercise earlier. This very particular kind of forceful power being exerted on the bodies of people who are protesting in the streets, trauma being heaped upon trauma by federal officers in unmarked cars, and a militarized police force equipped with weapons designed to quell and kill. Also, all across this country and here in our congregation, there are white people engaging with, struggling with, reading and journaling about, and coming to terms with the realities of white supremacy. They're reaching toward enlightenment, awakening, and liberation in this very specific way. More and more white people are seeing just how deeply the trauma lines are that run through the heart of this nation. And so I want to talk a little bit about this term that we've maybe all been hearing more recently, this term of white fragility. It was a term that was coined by Robin DiAngelo, and people are talking about it in new and different ways. And some people are feeling some response to it that is uncomfortable. So I wanted to sort of break that down just a little bit. I've landed on an approach to thinking about this term that's helped me to understand it as a part of these broader human phenomena. I've begun to think of white fragility in much the same way as I think of Eckhart's pain body, or of Menachen's dirty pain. It's another way to describe these predictable, trauma-based responses designed to move a white-bodied person who feels threatened away from the source of pain into safer space, quickly, efficiently. In a way, it's our body's wisdom, this mechanism that's designed to protect us and remove us from unsettling or perceived unsafe situations. But much like other trauma responses, this amygdala response is often responding to threats that are not real. And in fact, removes our power in a situation, leaving us feeling small, scared, unhappy, attacked, powerless to change our situation. If my own personal experience is any kind of guide for the past few months, my guess is that many of us have gotten to experience a number of deep, beautiful, and moving conversations with other white-bodied people as we grapple in a more daily way with systemic racism, white supremacy, and how to be an ally. I imagine many of us also have had conversations that leave us feeling frustrated, maybe a little panicky. Perhaps knowing that our own white, fragile pain bodies can be triggered in this way, the same way that we've been talking about the pain body being triggered, can help us to stay grounded in those conversations, can help us to get unstuck from feeling guilt and shame when we don't respond, and don't respond perfectly, and can help us to continue to show up daily for the work that has to be done, that we might move into a clean pain and into a place of more authentic power with. Perhaps this broader framework of understanding that Tolle and Menachem and D'Angelo, van der Kolk, Eck, Jesus and the Buddha, that these thinkers and philosophers and wayfinders have given us, can give us too the sense of resiliency needed to continue to engage the conversations, knowing that we are actively laying down new and more adaptive neural pathways with each conversation, with each purposeful observation of what's going on inside of us. Ultimately, I understand it this way. Engaging our own pain body in a clean or purposeful way means cultivating a power with. It means acknowledging our own ability to withstand the pain of growth, learning, understanding, and clear-eyed contemplation of painful truths. The experience of clean pain empowers us, moving us toward more integration and integrity, moving us toward that liberated and awakened state the spiritual masters have been describing. Dirty pain equates to a kind of power over, trying to exert power over our interior selves by denying or silencing, or exerting power over others in order to keep ourselves safe. Dirty pain means attempting to deny truths in order to keep the consequences at bay. But those personal or collective truths are still there. It requires a great many shielding tools, this dirty pain. It requires denial and misdirection, numbing. Ultimately, it's a form of violence toward ourselves and toward others. It's exactly what D'Angelo is describing when she talks about white fragility. Another way to think of it might be to say this, that clean pain can help us to grow into our lives, can help us to, as Ruth Gendler might put it, choose to grow into the coat that power has crafted for us. The image I have landed on is this: clean pain stands, patient and alert, mindful that we have places to be, new adventures to undertake together. She beckons us over, holding out that coat of power, encouraging us to inhabit it fully. Thank you. I invite us now into our moment of prayer for our joys and sorrows. You can enter those into the chat box. We bring with us, as I said, all of that that trails behind us. And here's our opportunity to celebrate and embrace and extend our compassion and empathy to one another. For the joys of new beginnings, of children coming together, of our animal friends, the joys of this beautiful summer weather, and the joy of seeing our family and friends as they step into their own coats of power. For the sorrows that we also bring with us this morning, the deaths of dear and loved ones, the losses that we experience, those painful times when things don't go quite as we want them to. Joy for the ability to move through hard times together. For all of those things that are said and unsaid, written and left in our own hearts, we're so very grateful. Thank you for being here, for bringing all of who you are to this service this morning.
Each of us brings gifts to share to support our religious community, our time, talent, our music, and yes, our financial resources. This church and our work in the world is supported by the generous donations of members and friends. There are many ways to give. Information about how to give will be shown on the screen. You can text to donate, visit our website, or send a check in the mail. However you are called to give this morning, we are grateful for your support. The offering will now be gratefully received. May these offerings be transformed for the good of our world, the hopes of our community, and our highest ideals.
So we've come to the end of our service. Our chalice extinguishing and benediction words are by Darcy Roque. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day.